Hey, it's 11:40 The Bet here in Las Vegas and Audacy Sports, wherever you're tuned in, whether it's the Audacy app on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And 38 at the Garden is a new HBO documentary coming out October 11th, right before the NBA season. Takes us back to 2012. Kind of can't believe it. 10 years ago, my freshman year, quite frankly, the year of Linsanity. The year I lost my virginity, but that's not important. Look, this documentary is covering truly one of the most riveting stories in basketball history when it comes to Jeremy Lin as a New York Knick. And not only relives it, though, but also it puts into perspective what happened and where we're going now. So joining us is the director of this documentary, Frank Chi. First off, congratulations on the project. Thank you for making time for us. And I want to get this out the way because I was a little disappointed. And I shouldn't be, because I'm about to say I was disappointed about people on the internet and some of the comments that they leave, which, what do you expect? But
Yeah.
There was a couple people underneath the trailer on Instagram, for example, that were saying this is a documentary about a 2-week run when it's so much more than that. So let's get the pessimism out the way. Your response to that specifically?
I think that they have to tune in to see what the movie is really about, right? 30 at the Garden is a basketball story, but I could describe it without basketball because it's essentially a story about stereotypes. It's a story about what happens when someone comes out of nowhere and shatters those stereotypes. And I mean, you've seen the movie at this point, right? Like it ends on a sobering note about today when those stereotypes have been weaponized, right? So I think if you are a basketball fan, you're just going to love the fact that you get to relive something that happened that came out of nowhere and just took over the entire sports world for 2 weeks, right? That is a fun experience in of itself. I mean, I can't stop people from being haters if they have a certain, opinion about Jeremy or about Asian Americans. I don't know what it is. But I think I encourage anyone to watch the movie because I think people will get the perspective of why it meant so much to so many people in a very, very short, succinct kind of way. I give a lot of context in the movie for why, specifically if you're Asian American, that moment meant so much. The way you grew up, the way society has built these walls of stereotypes around you. And that's why Jeremy's story has always meant so much to me personally, because it was the greatest example of someone who looked like me, who had this wall of stereotypes built up around them, trying to define them. And then he sees every crack in that wall and just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing until that wall comes crumbling down. And he did it in front of all of us, right? If you're different,
in New York City, in New York City, the Mecca,
right? And that to me is why, like, if you identify as being different in this country at all, it doesn't matter your background, but if you feel like you walk into a room or down the street or to a party and you feel like you walk in and people just judge you, you're gonna love this movie, I promise.
Listen, you're giving me the same goosebumps that I got last night watching the documentary. And real quick, just to take this from the beginning, in the beginning stages of this idea and bringing it into existence. So in your background, you did the documentary on RBG, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So super eclectic now when we're talking about you're going from that now into sports. Now, when
I was featured. No, I was featured in the documentary. I didn't make that one.
Oh, IMDb lied to me. My research. I'm sorry, my bad. But I do want to ask you, when the opportunity presented itself, was this as simple as basically going, I'm not passing up the opportunity to tell a story about a cultural phenomenon and someone who was so groundbreaking? Or did you have hesitation?
I'll put it this way. When I keep it to myself and when I talk to other Asian Americans about Linsanity, it's always understood. Like, we know that was special because we don't have to explain it anymore, right? I'll tell you a little bit about the birth of this idea. This was like 2020. I was having a conversation with one of my producers, Trayvon Free, about impossible moments, right? What is a moment when society at large assigns to a group of people saying, you can't do this, and then someone comes out of nowhere and shatters that, right? And we were talking about in the context of Obama becoming president, because that is the biggest impossible moment any of us have lived through, just objectively, right? So he was like, like what other moments feel like that? And I was like, listen, man, I'm Asian, so I only have one answer, and it's insanity. And I told him about my night when Jeremy dropped 38 at the Garden. That's where the name of the movie comes from. It's from that conversation. I was living in DC at the time, and I took the train up to New York, and I tried to get in the Garden, and the scalpers were like trying to charge me like $700. Like, I'm 27 years old, I got no money, right? So I go to Koreatown. I go to Koreatown, and like it's right next door to the Garden, right? And I sit down in one of the karaoke bars, and like I'm just like, all right, I'll just watch it here. It's the best I can do. And looking back on it, I don't think I would have traded the experience I had for being in the Garden itself. Because I'm surrounded by people who look like me or my age, or maybe a little older. And, you saw the game, you saw the movie, like Jeremy played out of his mind for the whole game. So you have 2 hours of people just losing their mind, right? They're running around, they're screaming, they're crying, and it's just incredible. And I'm doing all of that too, but I'm just trying to take it all in. I'm like, is it the stereotypes people experience and this is a cathartic reaction to that? Is it maybe never living up to the dreams of their parents' expectations and having to deal with that? Like, is it both? I mean, it was certainly both for me. And when I told that, it was telling that to someone who isn't Asian. When I told it to Trayvon, he was just like, how is that not a movie? Like, are you serious? Like, that's an incredible story. And I'll tell you what, the first part of the movie is called Doubt. I think the first thing I did when I said that to him was to doubt that, because I was like, like people don't care what Asian people think in this country. We're invisible. And insanity happened 8 years ago, right? And I thought about it a little more, and I was like, man, like this is 2020, so anti-Asian violence is already starting to pick up. And I was like, if we can tell this story and tell it about stereotypes, and and Jeremy is down to do so, to like bring his story not just out of his own personal experience, but for the community to experience it that way. Then we got to do it. Then it's something that has to be told 10 years later in this context. It's a larger than basketball, larger than sports movie. It's a movie about the power of sports and that how that can elevate certain people's life experiences for the whole world to pay attention to. And that to me has always been why I love sports and why this, to me, as a sports movie, I have a hard time thinking that if you're watching the movie, or in the movie, you're thinking about basketball. You're thinking about you. You're thinking about your life. You're thinking about how you take in the daily stereotypes that sort of consume so much of us, and how we manage it, right? So that's why we made this movie. That was the birth of the idea. When we came to Jeremy about it, he's so humble. He was just like, "Are you sure it was that big of a deal? I was just trying to make it in the league, right?" And like, I really respected and appreciate that that was the perspective he was coming from. But I had to be like, listen, man, like that, like two most magical nights of my life on a larger like societal level, like the night Obama was elected president and the night you dropped 38 at the Garden, right? And like, I wanted to tell the story from that perspective, and I think we achieved that with this movie.
No, 100%. And just real quick, I want to know quickly, was there a courting process for Jeremy? Like you said, was there a hesitation for him? And also, I guess bigger picture too, because like when we're trying to aspire to our dreams, right? And I'm a first generation American here with my parents, and when you're bringing up now, you want to make it in entertainment and any sort of facet. Like still to this day, I don't think my parents actually understand what I do day to day. They're like, "Oh, you talk sports," and I've been lucky enough. There's been a couple games on ESPN that like I'm in the background in the press, and they're like, "Oh, okay, he's doing something because I see him on TV." But I don't think they really grasp what we're trying to do, whether being a director, trying to be a movie star, trying to be an athlete.
For sure.
And for Jeremy, he was trying to make it to the league. That's all he thought.
Right.
And then now he becomes a cultural phenomenon. And with great power comes great responsibility. And now he's an icon, and there's responsibilities that come with that. So I'm curious, as you're telling this story and as you tie it into what was going on at the height of the pandemic and all this Asian hate, do you think he really just basically like, did he understand that responsibility? Did that weigh him down? Do you feel like he shied away from it in your time spent making this documentary and talking to him?
Oh, absolutely not. He was, I think, the first person that I remember who was like an Asian American celebrity who said something, when all of this was picking up, because he was talking about in the context of things being said to him during games when the pandemic was just starting, right? And that was like a really, really vivid memory for me. And just in the conversations we've had, the fact that he chose to do this movie, right? The way he talked. I mean, look, not everybody is comfortable sharing their story in a collective way, right? That's just, I understand that.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was, and I mean, you've seen the movie, the ending isn't really about Jeremy. The ending is about like what it's like to be Asian in America. Jeremy actually has a great line in the movie. It's like, it's so weird to relive Linsanity 10 years later, because that was such an incredible moment. But it's all like, you know, this is the worst time to be Asian American in recent memory. So it's just really strange to like relive our favorite memory as Asian Americans during the worst time to be Asian American in recent memory.
Yeah.
That it's a cruel irony for this moment. But I also think, you know, as long as this is the reality of the situation that we're in, having stories that can be more universal than just, you know, Asian people talking about it, like Linsanity, it's an opportunity for us to have these hard conversations in a way that can be productive, right? So that was very much like in the process of Jeremy agreeing to do this, going from, you know, this is a story that you hold very personally about Linsanity, right? About your life, to, okay, now we're going to tell this story from the perspective of the Asian fan about why it brought up so many emotions, why people were running down. I mean, like telling you about that bar earlier. There's somebody at the end of the game who didn't pay their tab and just ran out the bar in tears, right?
Yeah.
The bartender didn't even do anything. The bartender was just like, okay, you know, it was one of those nights, so I'm just gonna let it go, right? Like this is very much from that perspective about watching someone like Jeremy, you know, pull off the feat that he did, especially the night he did it against the Lakers. So when we brought it to that perspective, when we said, okay, this is the larger than life story, that's when everything sort of came together for us. And I gotta say, I've been part of like many creative projects. Sometimes they go off the, you know, just off the deep end, and they end up being terrible products. And sometimes they just feel like a magical ride where a lot of people just hone in on one mission, and we build something special. And this is definitely the latter.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. And truthfully, like the one thing I enjoyed too is it felt like, in the most positive way, it felt like it was 5 minutes because it was so quick. But then at the same time,
Yeah,
too, is it's not just specifically the game at Madison Square Garden against the Lakers. It kind of goes through the entire the beginning of the run through the rest of it, which I truly appreciated. And also, everyone that you got on this documentary to talk about it, whether it's Tyson Chandler or Mon Shumpert, who of course played with him, or Pablo Torre, who I think happy birthday. I think it's his birthday today.
it is.
Everyone
It is.
was it was everyone was phenomenal, and they really struck a chord in some of the things, and especially for the minorities, no matter what ethnicity you are. Like, it was
Right.
really touching. So I guess the one question I do want to ask you is, what's the one thing that stuck out to you in talking to people, and as they describe not only what was going on, but what Jeremy Lin meant to them, or means to them, I should say.
You know, there's something that Hassan Minhaj, the comedian, says in the movie that really blew me away, because I didn't even think about it that way. And I think about Linsanity all the time. And when he said it, I was like, wow. You know, he's talking about that Toronto buzzer beater, right? And he's talking about Jeremy waving off his teammates because he was like, I'm going to take the shot. I'm going to take the final shot. And Hassan was like, you know, like that just, it made me think about all the times where I passed the ball when I shouldn't have, when I gave up an opportunity, because that's what the stereotype of Asian Americans is in this country, is that, you know, you're the junior partner, you're the supporting actor. You don't get to take the lead, right? You don't get to take the shot. You don't get to be the protagonist. And that was really powerful to me. And obviously, it's a big part of that moment in the documentary, right? And I think that it's really struck a lot of people who have seen it. You know, we premiered this at Tribeca in June, and we put it in a lot of Asian American film festivals this summer. And that was always sort of the moment after the movie, people come up to me and they talk about that moment, because that's something that they can relate to in their lives, is being in a workplace situation, being at a party, walking down the street, when you feel like these stereotypes can crush you. And that moment, Jeremy wasn't going to let the stereotypes crush him. And that's why that's probably my favorite moment in the movie.
And before we get to our last question, 30 at the Garden, the new HBO documentary, premieres October 11th, opening week for the NBA, right before the first game of the season. Perfect timing on that. But before we get you out of here, and Frank, once again, thank you so much for the time. Another thing that I loved about the documentary is all the clips that you pulled, whether it's, I don't want to do spoiler alert, there's a clip from Obama. There's a lot of news clips from local New York City during the pandemonium and people trying to buy stuff. So as you relive this and you were looking through and, hey, what do we want to put in the movie and stuff? What were some of the things that kind of made you go, wow, or surprised you, or you didn't remember, or you found out?
Oh man. I will put it this way. I totally forgot about the Linsanity OG. You know, the Rick Ross. Can I talk about that?
Hey, we are in Las Vegas, Nevada. You can literally talk about anything, Frank. Anything, Frank. I mean, it's all legal here.
I mean, I totally forgot. I remember when I found that clip and I was dying. Like, there was a strain of weed out in LA called Linsanity OG that everybody was trying to get their hands on. And I remember Rick Ross Instagram the fact that he had gotten his hands on it, and we put that in the documentary.
It was the perfect touch. It truly was the perfect touch. Look, man, I told you before we started the interview. Thank you so much for creating this. It was great to watch, and I'm happy that this moment and this important this part of basketball history is documented so well. So before this premieres out to the world, congratulations. 38 at the Garden premieres on HBO October 11th. Frank Chi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Adrian, for having me.
Perfect. That was awesome. Frank, thank you so much for the time, man.
No doubt. I appreciate you, man. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And then also,
I'm glad you liked it, for real.
No, yeah, no, honestly, I wasn't bullshitting. And I'll be sure I'm gonna tag you. I'm gonna drop this the week that it comes out, just so that it, kind of streamlines it into the release. But I'll be sure to tag you because I'm gonna pull these clips and make some content out of it too, to get the word around with the station, man. Take care, Frank.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, take care, Adrian.
Take care. Thank you, guys. Bye.